Hello, and welcome to the Geek on My Sleeve channel, where we do weekly book reviews and live book discussions every Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern. My name is Karl, and today we have Dr. Natasha Arora. How we doing, Tasha?
Good, happy to be here.
Yay. I'm excited.
To do this spoiler-free book review of Starsight, book two in the Skyward series. You were nice enough to do the Geek Out session with us over the original Skyward book, and we're going to be doing another Geek Out session for this book this Sunday from the point of recording. Hopefully, we get it up before then. Overall, what are your thoughts on the book?
Really good, as good as the first one. I don't like to reread books, so it's been a while since I've been in this
Yeah,
space, and it came back really quick. So I really appreciated that. Not every author does that well, and I really liked how there continued to be some of those big themes. And I remember we talked about that in the Geek Out session for the first book,
mm-hmm.
is how many big life and world themes were touched on, and not in depth. Like, some books pick one theme and really go for it,
Mm-hmm.
but just enough that you could initiate a conversation around it. And it's great if you wanted to have that conversation with somebody, or it's a great conversation starter in a lot of ways, which I really appreciated, and definitely continued in this book as well.
I agree with that. It picks up right where the first one leaves off. I felt like it went in a slightly different direction than I was initially anticipating from the first book, but I really enjoyed how the storyline progressed.
Yeah, I would say there weren't any big twists for me. They were just totally out of left field,
Hmm.
but nothing was necessarily cut and paste. Like, I didn't feel like I was reading the same book that I read over and over and over again.
Right, right. It gets a bit tiresome reading clones of different novels or seeing a lot of the same tropes.
Especially the second book. Like, you
Yes.
never know if it's going to be a copy of the first one, or if it's actually going to be a continuation of the story in a different way, and seeing the characters progress. And you could definitely tell that the characters were progressing and maturing, but
Hmm.
also experiencing new parts of their society and their roles and exploring. And it was very well done from that perspective, which is consistent with the first book too.
For our book reviews, we've started doing more of age ratings and then giving out rankings. This is a young adult book, and I felt it was very appropriate and would give it like an E or an E10 rating. Some minor violence, but not really that graphic. How about for you? You feel that's fair on the rating?
Yeah, I agree. And as far as like the violence part, I was actually thinking about that during some of the flight scenes and battle scenes, where
Mm,
I haven't read too many, like, we'll call them battle books or books with battles. I don't know. I
mm,
haven't read them, so I don't know. But it was really well done in the sense that if I were watching a movie of it,
mm-hmm,
I wouldn't be sitting there saying, okay, like, I know this is like the action scene, but is it over?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It wasn't like that. It had enough other pieces going in and out while those events were taking place,
Mm-hmm.
and that it kept the storyline moving. It wasn't just like battle,
Yes.
story's on pause. Okay, now we keep going.
Yes.
So I appreciated that. With that said, the battle movements and things were also well described, so it was enough that you could kind of visualize. And I really love a story where I can read it and have like a picture in my head of what's happening.
Yes.
It's well described, but good for a younger audience.
I agree with that. It's very kid friendly, which is nice. And I've gifted out the first book to other young adults in my life and would certainly feel comfortable having them continue this series. And Spensa is just such an incredible character. Before we get into those details, the book itself, audio length comes in at 14 hours and 30 minutes. and the Kindle edition is 461 pages. Overall ratings, we've been trying to do out of 5 stars. Where does it come in for you?
I would give it 4.5.
Yeah, I'm very cautious to give out like 5 stars on
Yeah.
anything, but for me, this book came pretty close. I'd say 4.5 stars is more than fair. There is a bit of a cliffhanger at the end of this book, but I was satisfied with it, and it wrapped up a lot of pieces very well. Again, don't want to get into too much spoilers. 4.5 stars, I feel, is very fair. In regards to character development, out of 5 stars, we have our main character, Spensa. We still get to see some of the other main characters from book one and get introduced to some other characters as well. How would you rate character development out of 5 stars?
I'd say maybe a 4. It was enough that I could follow and kind of get a picture of what the characters were like in different ways, both like their personality, but also like their physical
Mm-hmm.
attributes or
Mm-hmm.
lack thereof.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so that was good, but it wasn't a book that spent an extra effort to develop the characters.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I feel especially in Brandon Sanderson's later writings, he does a really good job, at least for me, making the characters believable. Spensa, she kind of has her own quirks, and she's this lovable character, but she still makes mistakes. She still makes the bad call, which is how life goes, right? And is somewhat refreshing when you're reading. You want to be able to see yourself in these characters just so you can relate to them, and she certainly does a lot of things right, and then she has some moments where you're just like, yeah, yeah, been there. um
Yeah, that's one thing without giving too much away that I thought was really funny, especially towards the end of the book where things got a little dicey for
mhm.
a bit.
Mhm.
And I was thinking, yeah, this is a young adult's book, but man, I was just there yesterday.
Yeah.
It's crazy how it's still so relatable, and I think that goes to some of the themes that we talked about earlier,
Mhm.
and that there's so much of it that just carries through the book and hits on so many different aspects of life and people and society, and that it's very easy to relate and have conversations, and it's very easy to relate and have conversations, and it's very easy to relate and have conversations and understand what the character is going through or how that applies to the reader too.
Yeah, and I've talked about it before, but I feel that's one of the great things, even in fantasy and sci-fi books, is like even though we're dealing with aliens or other creatures, a lot of those experiences are very similar to our own, and the challenges that we face is okay, yeah, you know, there's all these different people, there's all these different species, but we might not be dealing with aliens ourselves, but we deal with a lot of these same challenges.
One interesting theme in the book around aliens and species where I thought he did a really great job of creating a space around those differences
Hmm.
in the way that this new story unfolds that I wasn't necessarily anticipating. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, and we get to see a bit of that with Spensa. And she has a few of those moments of reflection though, where you can see the empathy through her eyes as she goes and see these things where for her development wise, we get introduced to her in the first book and she's just this I'm going to conquer the world and be like these epic heroes that her grandmother tells her about, and she kind of sees like that's not really life. They might be different, but they're people.
It was interesting to see that progression. One thing on the characters and how Spence had grown from the first book.
Hmm.
One of the characters that was newly introduced in the second book reminded me so much from the first introduction of the very beginning of the first book when you get to meet Spencer and how just her mannerisms and her language choices. And I was like,
Yes.
oh, it's
Y-
like a huge like juxtaposition side by side of
Mm-hmm.
how much Brandon Sanderson allowed this character to grow over 2 books.
Yes. Yes.
It was crazy. It was so well done.
As far as writing style goes, out of 5 stars, how do you feel?
For this audience, I would say it's a 5
Yeah.
because it's so easy to read. You know, like you read off how many pages it is, 400 some, but
Yeah.
like it doesn't feel like that.
Yeah.
It's just a quick read and you just want to keep reading.
Yes. Yes. I remember the first time I listened to it, I had trouble putting it down because it just flows so well. And I agree with you 100%. Full disclaimer, Brandon Sanderson fanboy, 5 stars is more than fair on the writing style. Last category, scaling and progression as far as like pacing goes with the story, out of 5 stars.
Somewhere between 4 and 4.5.
Okay, okay. We could do
um,
quarter stars. Are we putting it at a 4.25?
I can't make up my mind. It's somewhere in there. The pacing was good.
Yeah,
I can't help but wonder if it could have been better.
it always could be
You know,
better.
like it, but you know, sometimes you read something and you're like, "Oh, that was so
Yeah,
good." You know,
yeah.
obviously they played around with the different options and they got it just right. And this one on on the scaling and things, I don't know. I mean, it was good. Don't get
Mm-hmm.
me wrong, it was definitely good, but
Mm-hmm.
I I don't know if it was spot on.
Yeah, yeah. I agree with that, and I often have to stop myself and remind myself, like, okay, what type of book is this? YA. And then I just know that for me personally, I'm a big fan of these epic, long, drawn out, let's stop and smell the roses and like really explore this aspect of the book where you can't really do that as much in YA. I haven't really looked into it, but I think there's some requirements in order to meet that qualification as far as like length and everything goes. Any other final thoughts on the second installment of the Skyward series?
Ooh, is there a third one?
There's supposed to be a third one on the way. It's going to be a trilogy, and unlike some authors, Brandon Sanderson is a powerhouse. I don't know when the next one is scheduled to come out, but he releases at least a book a year, if not more, unlike some other authors, George R. R. Martin, um, where we've been waiting for a decade or so to get the next book. But yeah, it's an amazing book. Definitely recommend picking it up. Really looking forward to getting into the details in the upcoming Geek Out session and yeah, exploring it further.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah. So, thank you everybody for joining us in this spoiler free book review, and we are looking forward to geeking out with you here soon.